and say, how can systems serve people better? But that's a very systems view of the world. Whereas we looked at what we metaphorically call as the dark side of the moon, which is the other side, which is, hey, how do humans interface with these systems?
As you look at the evolution of automation, which is moving into agentic, and today people are saying that we'll bring in AI agents which will provide certain skills which an organization need.
You're generating 70 times more data footprint in the workplace, interacting with software as part of your work.
This evolution or revolution, I would say, is at a similar size and scale of what internet did for us.
And therefore, Scout is able to reason just by using interaction data, why are people not using this particular tool? Instead, what else are they doing? What does that tell you about the original tool?
In a way, also going to impact the way organizations at a board level, the leadership team is also looking at how they can have greater revenues for them from a growth perspective.
You almost, indeed answered the question that I had for you about the possibilities. Where we're talking about automation, we're talking about interaction data, business reinvention, and models like that. What are the possibilities, that AI can bring to the future?
Oh, that is in some sense endless. But maybe let me reinterpret your question as, what can AI do here and now, or in the near term? Let's start from there. Right. I think it can fuel two fundamentally important problems or areas. The first of which is what I've spoken about so far, which is, I think models like this will help us demystify how and why humans use technology inside the enterprise and what does it mean to business outcomes. That's what I described with Scout and so on. And I think that actually changes the very way in which we think of all office work. We have never had an opportunity in the last 40 years to think of office work in a more rigorous, scientific way, to reason about, if I do these things, this business outcome will change, and here is the data, and so on. Largely, it's been survey-driven, sampling, instinct, experience, a mix of this. I think this will formalize very quickly with data like this. The second is, I think it will dramatically change programming. If you take any of these current models right now, perhaps one of their best use cases for generating text, right? Certainly of models trained on text, is to be able to generate code. Now, does that mean they can generate entire systems of code? No, obviously not. But it will asymmetrically impact the productivity of programmers. And that is an incontrovertible fact, and that will continue to be stronger, even more so as we proceed. Now, there are other use cases too, like summarizing large volumes of text and things like this and so on.
Sure.
That probably requires a little bit more iteration, exactly along the lines of what Sumit was saying. These models will need to be more localized to specific patterns of a team for a lot of these things to be successful. You need interaction data to localize them and so on. That's why I'm not yet going there. I'm just saying here and now in the near term, it will dramatically change the lives of all engineers who write code, maintain code, debug code, and so on, and for the better.
So while we're expecting, a larger impact with these new age technologies coming in, we also have to manage the risk aspect of it and the privacy. I know that, while building your interaction data and your AI models, you pay specific focus towards maintaining user privacy. I just want you to talk to me, about how you go about doing that and ensure that we're mitigating all possible risks.
Yeah, in the specific case and context of building a foundation model to understand interaction data and to connecting it to business outcomes, the key, and we have believed that from day zero, and we have lived by what we believe, is there's always a temptation that organizations have to say, tell me who is best, therefore the inverse is tell me who's the worst. Right? We just don't do that. In fact, there's a business cost to it, and that's fine. We're okay to live by that business cost. Instead, our philosophy has been, at the point of capture, we forget who the individual from whom we're learning these patterns are. And instead, we focus on the team. Because fundamentally, a team An organization is not dependent on one individual, it's dependent on a team. A team is the unit of execution of any organization. And that's why we look at the team as the right abstraction. And what that does is it straightaway takes away the stress of who is the individual. And so we ask what patterns of work emerge across a team. How do you help a team be successful? What is affecting a team? How is technology not serving this team? How is this process broken for this team? And so on and so forth. And so in the very construction and nature of our technology, we have filed several patents in building new innovations that protect the privacy of the end user. It's harder. You have to, it's much easier to reveal who the end user is. It's simpler to build technology that can actually work on revealing who the end user is. But we have taken the longer route because we want to protect the end individual and their privacy. Anonymize them at source, focus on patterns across the team and so on.
Which is amazing. Sumit, your take on?
So I'll tell you that when I look at risk, the one part is around how the data is being used for an organization. And I think so this problem statement, a lot of organizations and regulations around that have matured over a period of time to say that, what data is being captured, how it is being used, and how you are also ensuring that you are not using that data for certain things. But when you combine data with the art of possible with AI, I think so it requires newer kind of guardrails to be put into place, because the art of possible is, massive of how you can bring this into play. And it also requires, there are organizations which are saying that, if I'm going to have a future organization which will have agents and human beings working together, the first thing is I need to have a clarity at a policy level to say where I'm bringing in human workforce, where I'm bringing digital workforce. It cannot be, on the fly decision being taken by various business units, because I need to get that model going in. The moment I do that, now as you bring in, digital agents into your organization, you've got over the last many years of how organizations have been existing, they've got departments like a HR department looking at, right from onboarding to offboarding to training requirements. But you need to have a similar structure to say, how are you managing agents within the organization, taking them right from the onboarding to the performance management, reviewing when I say that, the self-learning model around that, and ensuring that, the human agent interaction goes seamlessly without causing a friction or a concern in either which way. Having said that, it also has related kind of impact on the way you're looking at your internal controls, of how you're reviewing the risk coming into the organization. Because, if you look at different kind of, I've created a patient or a doctor assistant, which is taking all the medical scans and giving you guidance. What if that guidance is wrong and the doctor is giving a wrong kind of advice to the patient itself? Who's responsible for that? So every organization is saying, what kind of risk is acceptable? What are the guardrails around that? And ensuring that you have the internal controls and policies around that. So while all of this organizations are also doing, I also understand that there is a lot of talk where industries are talking and regulators are also saying that how do we bring in the right kind of regulations for AI with a larger adoption. And I'm sure we'll see much more robust mechanism being formulated as this cycle getting more matured. And the last aspect which I want to leave is that this is not a one-time exercise. The pace at which the technology is evolving, you need to revisit your guardrails every 6 months would be an interesting thing. So I think so a lot of us in the industry have a lot more role to play to see that how we are making this whole transition from a typical automation initiatives to an agentic workforce, and putting our heads together to ensure it's solving the larger good for the people of the world.
So you mentioned two interesting things. One is the art of possible and generative AI. But as I understand, generative AI is just one form of AI. Can I ask both of you to put in your perspectives, you from a product perspective, and you probably Sumit, you could give me a business perspective of where we're seeing the possibilities of AI emerging in the near future.
As I mentioned, to me the slam dunk immediate thing is for engineering teams, for programmers, without a shadow of doubt. And the very likely next adjacent or sort of use to it is in understanding large swaths of text. Because that's what a lot of these models are really fundamentally good at. You give them large volumes of text, they figure out relationships between these words, and they can tell you, they can summarize things, they can generate some other words and so on. And that actually shows up in, that's a lot of it is quote unquote unstructured work, but it shows up across all industries. Anytime you're reading a document, this becomes relevant. Anytime you're writing a document or an email, it becomes relevant. So it very likely, I think, will show up in sort of any piece of work anyone's doing where you have a lot of text. But to be successful there, it goes back to something Sumit said earlier on, which is today you have, one of the strengths and flaws of a lot of these models is the universality of these models.
Right.
Right, which is they're trained on a whole bunch of general purpose data available on the web, makes them universal. But to be to make a dent on the business outcomes for a team, you need to be specific or localized to the work patterns of that team. What is the kind of text that they see? What is the business outcome that they're trying to achieve? Because if you summarize a bunch of stuff, and let's say that person still spends a lot of effort in and we see this in some of our customers. They say, hey, I deployed this model, it summarized all this text in a call center, and now people are still spending a lot of time editing that thing because it didn't summarize it well enough, because that model was not specific to that team's work pattern. And so for that to come to life, what you really need to be able to do is to take the interaction data for that specific team, improve this model's training with that data, therefore you localize it to that team, and then you're more likely to see a higher chance of success of these models serving that team with text. I think that's sort of a second bucket. And of course, my own favorite bucket is as long as there are going to be people in the office, we are going to have the mystery of how work gets done. What is it that people and teams experience? Where are there frictions? Where are there bottlenecks? And for all of that, understanding all of it, then figuring out what to improve and change, and then measuring whether that thing improved and changed or not, all of that will require a model to understand how humans and machines interact with each other. And that's not so much about as being generative, but what the AI model there is very good at is seeing patterns and reverse engineering patterns.
Right.
Just by looking at how humans interact with machines. And the nature of those interactions themselves, by the way, are going to change. And as they change, work patterns will change. And again, the ground truth of how all of that work is happening is in, as what Sumit referred to, the system of record of work, which is interaction data. And I think that's another area where you'll see AI models play a pivotal role in the enterprise.
So, the interesting part as part of this whole evolution is that the leadership of the organizations are, exposed to a lot of AI interactions, discussions to say that this is something which will disrupt the way they are, servicing their clients. And clearly they need to change themselves. So I think the urgency at the top is really well established. Now organizations are, looking at models that how do I manage that change? And in a realistic scenario, you have BAU activities happening. It's the run the organization and change the organization. One part is how do you do the orchestration between run the organization, change the organization, because you can't stop either one of them. One is something very tactical for looking at your quarter numbers and beyond that. And the other part is ensuring that you are relevant for the future itself. Now, the smarter organizations are saying that, okay, first I need to go back to the drawing board and get my strategy relooked at. Because certainly with AI, the art of possible in terms of I may be able to service my customers differently. I may be able to provide services to a different category of customers altogether. It may have an impact on the ecosystem of the partners, distributors with whom I work with, and also create new products and services. And, so the possibilities are, endless around that. So one says that you need to look at that strategy and be very clear. The second part is execution of that strategy. And we are building the execution part of it. You also need to ensure that whatever work which you are investing in technology is taken as building blocks rather than rip and replace. So initiatives which you are doing right now, how do you ensure you are able to capitalize on those investments and take it to the next level and vice versa. So looking at conflict in any technology investments have to be identified earlier to ensure that, okay, this is my building block, because this is a journey. You can't change everything, in 12 months kind of time frame. So looking at the investments and putting the right building blocks. And the third part would be around change management. And change management, particularly because you are working in a traditional manner with heavy reliance on human beings, and making the human, I would say, agent configuration for the organization effectively to ensure that you are able to run the organization smoothly without any resistance to change coming in. So the smarter organizations are looking at all of these aspects put together to ensure that they are coming out of this journey as a more, I would say, resilient organization, a much smarter organization with better customer service, newer revenue options. So a very interesting phase for us as consultants to see the kind of change which is happening and what it will unfold for a lot of organizations.
If I may add an example, because you inspired me to give an example based on what you were saying, Sumit. Let's say an organization, let's talk about customer service. I'll give you an example of how, let's go beyond the normative stuff of like, oh, what will generative AI do, right? And now you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong on this. If an organization wanted to ask the following question, is the revenue that I'm generating from my customers commensurate, or rather the other way around, is the effort that I'm putting in and the cost that I'm putting in to servicing my customers commensurate with the revenue that I generate from those same customers? How do you answer that question today? It's not easy. You probably have an end-to-end notion of cost, but you do not have a clear view of what is the cost of labor of servicing. I'm talking about office work, okay? But that is, because if you knew that, then you would optimize revenue by cost. There are lots of things you would do with this. That is an example of a kind of question that, thanks to a new generation of AI models now, and interaction data is an example, and Scout and so on, you can begin to address. I know of no other way, including if you hire humans, that you can answer that question, except by leveraging AI models. Because what that will let you do is it will now give you an entirely different basis for thinking of how do you optimize your customer service function, how do you serve some of your key customers better, do you have inefficiencies in how you're servicing your long tail of customers, what can you do better, etc. and so on. And it's no longer somebody's opinion, it's data. To me, 5 years ago, you couldn't easily answer this question, right? And there are a whole host of, now, I can turn this around. You could be a auto, components company, one of the largest ones, which is our customer. They have over 10,000 suppliers. And they were saying, look, we want to know which supplier creates, because of their lack of investment in their organization and so on, creates unnecessary manual labor for my teams, which causes me to spend more, and that hurts my bottom line. How do you answer this question? It's the same question, as I said earlier on, but you're just flipping it around to suppliers instead of customers and so on. Right? And these AI models can enable these kinds of questions that businesses can ask.
And the saying which says data is the new oil, and if you're able to harness that data and build knowledge and extract insights, I think so, businesses will get smarter and will be able to create newer revenue sources or better customer service options. So interesting time, I would say. Totally echo that.
So clearly data, intelligence, AI models, intuitive, dynamic future, probably these are the buzzwords that we are going to be hearing very soon, and that's going to form the future of all enterprises, of all smart enterprises, I would say. On that note, I think we can wrap up today's discussion. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Sumit, for joining us. To our viewers, you can catch this and more of the other episodes of Intelligent Automation Bytes online.